This was the area where they had to defend. And you can see, you know, it was quite a little hike. So if you're laden with your armaments and you're trying to come up and people are shooting at you, as hard as it was for you, it would have been very hard to come in the face of this. So Hawthorne knew what he was doing, and he commanded the high ground, a smart dude. And we're not going to walk through it, but if you took one of the trails over there, there's a place called Sentinel Rock, which is it's a big boulder, and behind one of the marksmen, you know, one of the soldiers, used it to keep Brant's soldiers from coming up until he got picked off. And as Brant's wounded, people got wounded, they took them, we're going to walk to Hospital Rock, because that's really the most significant of all these places. And they took them to Hospital Rock. But, you know, the day went on, they didn't have any food, they got tired, they started...
What time of year was it?
July.
Okay.
July 29th, they started to run out of ammunition. Brant's guys were relentless, they were smart, they were, you know, they were doing everything they could. And so eventually Hawthorne gave the every man for himself guys. Brant's raiders breached the line, and that was it. It was the end. And so everybody fled. Hawthorne got out alive. Benjamin Tustin, who was the dentist, who was himself wounded, was caring for the other wounded, being a medical person. All of the wounded were killed by Brant's soldiers. There's a apocryphal story of one guy wasn't killed because he was a Mason, and he gave the Mason sign to Brant, who was a Mason, and his life was spared. But all of the rest, all of the wounded were killed. In all, there were at least 44 men fighting for our country's freedom that died here. And their names are on a plaque there. You can go look at them. Their bodies were never recovered for 45 years. Okay? Nobody ever came back. Part of that was because this was as wild as it got. It's still pretty wild. We see bear all the time here. You know, this is wild country. So this was wild country. This was real wild country in those days. Partly was the shame. Everybody that left here that wasn't for the British had been defeated. They ran for their lives. They left their comrades. So some people think it was the shame of, well, yeah, let's go back and deal with that. Or let's just forget that ever happened. But then, come to find out that this guy named the Wirtz brothers, after whom Wirtzboro is named, thought, let's build a canal that connects Honesdale, Pennsylvania with Kingston, the Hudson River. And we'll bring coal to people in New York City. And they did, and it ran for 70 years, which meant people started coming back to this area. Barryville was a big place in those days. Almost became the county seat of Sullivan County. So Barryville, so all of a sudden, attention focused back on this area, and some guys from Goshen, where the militia was, said, well, let's go back and see if there's anybody left. And they came back and they recovered the remains, which had laid for 45 years.
Wow. Were they buried underground? Or
No, nobody
left
buried
there,
anything.
yeah.
Nothing.
I mean, the birds and the animals didn't eat them?
There were bones.
Oh, okay.
That's all there were. And they recovered them and they took them back to Goshen and they interred them in Goshen. And there's a monument in Goshen to this battle, to the remains of the people of Goshen who came here. They came back, they recovered the bones, they erected a monument there, and then 100 years after the battle, they came and they erected that stone. So on July 22nd, 1879, that was unveiled.
What's the significance of the stone?
What impact did it have on the general war?
That great question. So,
Down the hill to knock
Because you never hear about it.
so so the idea of the British coming down here with their Indian allies was to try to draw Washington out of New Jersey. And they had hoped that Washington, or he would send like Hamilton or one of these folks out here to face the raid. And Washington said, no doing. You know, you guys are on your own. The battle is not there. The battle is here. So he wrote the area off. And so it didn't have any effect on the war. Because the big pieces, the big players,
It was just strategic.
it was tactical. It was a little thing that went on that didn't amount to anything. So we're going to walk to Hospital Rock.